The airport hummed like a living beast, a cacophony of rolling suitcases and hurried goodbyes, but all Elena could hear was the pounding of her own heart. She stood frozen, her boots rooted to the polished floor of JFK's Terminal 4, staring at Sarah's silhouette against the golden glow of the setting sun. 3 words clawed at her throat, desperate to escape. "Can you stay?" Elena Martinez, 28, had never been good at endings. Growing up in a small Brooklyn apartment with her abuela's stories of love and loss, she'd learned to guard her heart like a fortress. But Sarah Thompson, with her easy laugh and fearless spirit, had slipped past those walls 2 years ago, on a rainy night at a Greenwich Village bookstore. They'd been strangers then, reaching for the same dog-eared copy of Jane Eyre. Sarah's fingers had brushed Elena's, and that fleeting touch had sparked something neither could ignore. Now, as Sarah stood 10 feet away, clutching a boarding pass to Seattle, Elena felt that spark flicker, threatening to die. The terminal was a blur of motion, businessmen barking into phones, families hugging tearfully, a janitor sweeping up a spilled coffee. Sarah's green eyes, sharp and searching, locked onto Elena's. At 30, Sarah carried herself with the quiet strength of someone who'd fought for every inch of her place in the world. Raised in a conservative Virginia suburb, she'd left home at 18, chasing freedom and a life that felt true. She'd found it in New York, in late-night jazz bars in Elena's arms. But now, a job-off-era dream job as a marine biologist promised a new life across the country. It was everything Sarah had worked for, everything she'd dreamed of, except it meant leaving Elena. Flight 237 to Seattle, now boarding at Gate 12. The intercom crackled, slicing through the moment. Sarah's shoulders stiffened, her fingers tightening around the boarding pass. Elena took a step forward, her suitcase bumping against her knee. She didn't care about the crowd, the noise, or the ticking clock. All she cared about was the woman in front of her, the one who'd made her believe in love again. "Sarah," Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper, "don't go." Sarah's lips parted, but no words came. Her scarf fluttered as a passerby rushed past, and she glanced at the gate, then back at Elena. The weight of the moment pressed down on them, heavy and unyielding. 2 years of stolen kisses in Central Park, of whispered secrets in their tiny Brooklyn apartment, of fighting and making up and loving fiercely, it all hung in the balance. "I have to," Sarah said finally, her voice breaking. "This job. It's my chance, Elena. You know that." Elena's chest ached, like someone had carved out a piece of her. She'd known this day was coming. Sarah had spent months applying for grants, pouring her heart into research proposals. When the call came from the Seattle Aquarium, Sarah's face had lit up in a way Elena hadn't seen in years. But knowing didn't make it easier. Elena had her own dreams. Her small graphic design business was finally taking off, her clients growing by the day. New York was her home, her pulse. How could she ask Sarah to stay when it meant giving up everything she'd fought for? But Elena wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. She closed the distance between them, her boots scuffing the floor. The crowd seemed to fade, the world narrowing to just the two of them. Sarah's eyes softened, and for a moment, Elena saw the girl who'd danced with her in the rain, who'd laughed until they both cried over a burnt attempt at arroz con pollo. That Sarah was still here, beneath the weight of this impossible choice. "Please," Elena said, her voice steadier now. "Just stay. We can figure this out together." Sarah's gaze dropped to the boarding pass, her thumb tracing its edge. The intercom blared again, urging passengers to board. Elena's heart thudded, each second a hammer strike. She wanted to grab Sarah's hand, to pull her close and never let go. But love, she'd learned, wasn't about holding someone back. It was about giving them wings even if it broke you. Sarah looked up, her eyes shimmering. "Elena," the words hung unfinished as a family rushed past, a child's suitcase clipping Elena's leg. The interruption shattered the moment, but Sarah's gaze didn't waver. She stepped closer, her breath warm against Elena's cheek. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered. "Then don't," Elena said, her voice fierce. "We can make this work. Long distance visits, whatever it takes. Just don't walk away." The terminal's chaos swirled around them, but Sarah's smile, small, hesitant, but real, cut through it all. She nodded, a single tear slipping down her cheek. "Okay," she said softly. "I'll stay." Elena's breath caught, hope flaring like a match in the dark. But as Sarah's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining, Elena knew this was only the beginning. Love wasn't a single choice. It was 1,000 small ones, each harder than the last. And as they stood in the middle of a crowded airport, the world rushing past, Elena felt the weight of those choices settle over them. They had no idea what lay ahead, but for now they had each other. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotion and compromise. Sarah called the Seattle Aquarium the next morning, her voice trembling as she explained she needed time to consider the offer. The recruiter was kind but firm. They'd hold the position for a week, no more. Sarah hung up, her face pale, and Elena felt a pang of guilt. Had she asked too much? But Sarah's hand squeezed hers, and the doubt faded, replaced by a quiet resolve to make this work. They spent that week really talking for the first time in months. Over coffee at their favorite Brooklyn cafe, they laid bare their fears and dreams. Elena admitted how much she feared losing Sarah, how every goodbye felt like a piece of her heart breaking. Sarah confessed that the job wasn't just about her career, it was about proving to herself and the world that she could be more than the girl who'd run from a suffocating home. They cried, laughed, and argued, but by the end of the week they'd made a plan. Sarah would take the job, but they'd try long distance. Elena would visit Seattle, and Sarah would come back to New York when she could. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. The first month apart was brutal. Elena threw herself into her work, designing logos late into the night to distract herself from the empty apartment. Sarah's texts came at odd hours, filled with photos of Puget Sound and stories of her new lab. They Skyped when they could, but the time difference in Sarah's long hours made it hard. Elena felt the distance like a physical ache, a hollow space where Sarah's warmth used to be. One night, after a particularly exhausting day, Elena found an envelope tucked into her sketchbook. Inside was a note in Sarah's messy handwriting. "I'm still here, even when I'm not. Love you always." Tucked inside was a pressed flower from their first date, a daisy Sarah had picked from a park. Elena held it to her chest, tears falling, and knew they'd make it through. But the challenges didn't end. Sarah's new job demanded everything: late nights, weekend fieldwork, and constant pressure to prove herself. Elena's business grew, but so did her loneliness. They fought over missed calls and canceled visits, their voices sharp across the miles. Yet every fight ended the same way, with apologies, promises, and the stubborn belief that love was worth it. By the third month they'd found a rhythm. Elena booked a flight to Seattle, her first visit. The moment she stepped off the plane and saw Sarah waiting, her scarf fluttering in the breeze, Elena knew she'd made the right choice. They spent a week exploring the city, wandering Pike Place Market, kissing under the Space Needle, stealing quiet moments in Sarah's tiny apartment. It wasn't New York, but it was enough. Back in Brooklyn, Elena started planning. She could freelance from anywhere, she realized. Maybe Seattle wasn't impossible. The thought scared her, leaving her abuela, her friends, her city, but it also thrilled her. Love was a leap and she was ready to jump. Elena's first winter in New York without Sarah felt like a city stripped of color. The holiday lights in Brooklyn flickered, but they couldn't warm the chill in her bones. She sat in their apartment, sketching furiously, trying to drown out the silence where Sarah's laughter used to be. The daisy from Sarah's note was pressed between the pages of her sketchbook, a fragile reminder of what they were fighting for. Long distance was a tightrope, and every day felt like a test of balance. Sarah's life in Seattle was a whirlwind of discovery. Her work at the aquarium consumed her, tagging marine life, analyzing data, presenting at conferences. She thrived on the challenge, but every late-night email to Elena carried a quiet ache. She missed the way Elena's eyes crinkled when she laughed, the way their hands fit together like puzzle pieces. Photos and video calls weren't enough. They were shadows of the real thing. Sarah started keeping a journal, scribbling thoughts she couldn't say aloud. What if I'm not enough for her anymore? What if she stops waiting? Their first big fight came in January. Elena had planned a weekend visit, but Sarah canceled at the last minute. A research trip to the Pacific coast couldn't be rescheduled. Over the phone, Elena's voice was sharp, cutting through the static. "You didn't even try, Sarah. Do I even matter anymore?" Sarah's silence was worse than any reply. When she finally spoke, her words were heavy with guilt. "I'm trying to build something here, Elena. For us. Don't you see that?" The call ended with tears on both sides, and for 2 days neither reached out. It was Elena who broke the silence, texting a simple, "I miss you." Sarah called back immediately, her voice raw. They talked until dawn, laying bare their fears. Elena admitted she felt abandoned. Sarah confessed she was terrified of failing at her job, at their love. They promised to do better, to carve out time no matter what. But promises, Elena learned, were easier made than kept. Spring brought a fragile hope. Sarah surprised Elena with a weekend trip to New York, showing up at her doorstep with a bouquet of daisies and a sheepish grin. They spent 3 days rediscovering their city, strolling through Central Park, sharing greasy pizza slices, making love in the quiet hours before dawn. For those 3 days the distance didn't exist. But when Sarah boarded her flight back to Seattle, Elena felt the ache return, sharper than ever. Back in Seattle, Sarah faced her own battles. Her colleagues were brilliant but competitive, and she felt like an outsider, always proving herself. One night, after a particularly brutal critique from her supervisor, she called Elena, her voice trembling. "What if I'm not cut out for this? What if I gave up everything for nothing?" Elena listened, her heart breaking across the miles, and reminded Sarah of the girl who'd left Virginia to chase her dreams. "You're stronger than you know," Elena said. "And I'm here. Always." Elena started exploring freelance opportunities in Seattle. She reached out to local businesses, pitching her designs, and was surprised by the interest. The idea of moving still scared her. New York was her roots, her family, her history, but the thought of being closer to Sarah made it feel possible. She didn't tell Sarah yet. She wanted to be sure. Instead, she sent care packages, sketches, cookies, a tiny bottle of Brooklyn air, and Sarah sent back photos of the ocean, shells, and handwritten notes that made Elena's heart skip. But the distance wasn't their only challenge. Elena's abuela Maria was getting frilier, her memory slipping. Elena spent evenings at her bedside, listening to stories she'd heard 100 times. Maria adored Sarah, always asking when she'd visit. One night, Maria gripped Elena's hand and said, "Mija, love is rare. Don't let it slip away." Elena nodded, tears in her eyes, knowing she couldn't leave her abuela behind. Not yet. By summer, their relationship was a delicate dance of hope and strain. They planned a trip together, a week in San Francisco, a neutral ground where they could just be. The city was a blur of cable cars, foggy mornings, and stolen kisses on windy piers. For the first time in months, they felt like a team again. One night, over wine and candlelight, Sarah took Elena's hand. "I don't want to do this without you," she said. "I'm scared, but I want us to figure this out. Together." Elena squeezed her hand, her heart full. "We will. I promise." But promises, they both knew, were only as strong as the people keeping them. As they returned to their separate lives, the weight of the distance settled back in. Elena's business was booming, but her heart was in Seattle. Sarah's career was soaring, but her nights were lonely. They were two women fighting for love in a world that pulled them apart, and every day was a choice to keep fighting. Fall arrived, painting New York in shades of amber and crimson, but Elena barely noticed. Her days were a blur of client meetings, hospital visits to her abuela, and late-night calls with Sarah. The distance was wearing them thin, like a thread stretched to breaking. They'd survived fights and silences, but now something heavier loomed, an unspoken question neither dared to ask. How long can we keep this up? Sarah's life in Seattle had settled into a rhythm, but it wasn't the one she'd hoped for. Her job was everything she'd dreamed, researching marine ecosystems, diving into the cold Pacific, but the pressure was relentless. Her colleagues respected her, but she felt like she was always one mistake away from losing it all. At night, she'd lie awake in her small apartment, staring at the ceiling, missing Elena's warmth beside her. She started sketching, something she hadn't done since college, doodling Elena's face in the margins of her notebooks. It was her way of holding on. Elena, meanwhile, was grappling with her own crossroads. Her design business was thriving, with clients from Brooklyn to Boston. But every success felt hollow without Sarah to share it. She'd started researching Seattle more seriously, housing costs, neighborhoods, even local art scenes. The idea of moving was no longer a fantasy but a plan, one she kept secret as she navigated her abuela's declining health. Maria's words echoed in her mind. Love is rare. Elena knew she couldn't let it go, but she also couldn't abandon her family. Their calls became less frequent, not out of anger but exhaustion. One night, Sarah didn't pick up, and Elena's texts went unanswered. Panic crept in sharp and cold. Had Sarah met someone else? Had she given up? When Sarah finally called back, her voice was heavy. "I'm sorry," she said. "It's just hard. I feel like I'm failing you." Elena's heart twisted, but she pushed back. "You're not failing me. We're just figuring it out." Thanksgiving brought a turning point. Sarah flew to New York, determined to spend the holiday with Elena and Maria. The three of them gathered in Maria's tiny apartment, the air thick with the scent of pernil and pastels. Maria, frail but sharp, teased Sarah about her fancy fish job and made them promise to dance at her next birthday. For a moment it felt like old times, Elena and Sarah stealing glances, their hands brushing under the table. But when Maria fell asleep, Sarah's smile faded. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "I love you, but I'm scared we're losing each other." Elena took her hand, her voice steady. "We're not lost. We're just scattered. But we can find our way back." That night they made a pact. No more secrets, no more holding back. They'd face the distance together, no matter how hard. Winter tested that pact. Sarah's work intensified, with a major research deadline looming. Elena's abuela took a turn for the worse, requiring more hospital stays. They leaned on texts and quick calls, but the gaps between them grew. One night, Elena found an old photo of them at Coney Island, laughing under a summer sky. She mailed it to Sarah with a note. "This is us. Don't forget." Sarah taped it to her fridge, a daily reminder of what she was fighting for. By spring, Elena made a decision. She'd moved to Seattle, not immediately, but soon. She'd found a few promising clients there, and her abuela's condition had stabilized enough to give her hope. She planned to surprise Sarah with the news during her next visit. But before she could book the flight, Sarah called, her voice trembling with excitement. "I got a grant," she said. "A big one. It means I can work from anywhere for 6 months. Elena, I'm coming back to New York." Elena's heart soared, but doubt crept in. Would 6 months be enough? What happened after? She pushed the questions aside, focusing on the now. Sarah was coming home, and that was enough. When Sarah arrived, the airport scene from a year ago replayed in reverse. Elena stood at JFK, her heart racing, as Sarah emerged from the crowd, her scarf fluttering. They ran to each other, colliding in a hug that felt like coming up for air. For the first time in months, the world felt right. Those 6 months were a gift. Sarah worked remotely, her laptop humming in their Brooklyn apartment as Elena sketched beside her. They cooked together, danced in the living room, and spent evenings with Maria, who beamed at their reunion. But the clock was ticking. The grant would end, and Sarah's job would call her back to Seattle. Elena knew she had to tell Sarah about her plan to move, but fear held her back. What if Sarah didn't want her to give up New York? What if they'd changed too much? One night, as they lay in bed, Elena found the courage. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice soft. "I could move to Seattle. For us." Sarah went still, her eyes wide. For a moment, Elena feared she'd misread everything. But then Sarah pulled her close, her voice thick with emotion. "You do that? For me." "For us," Elena corrected, and they kissed, sealing a new promise. The summer of Sarah's return was a golden blur. Each day a small victory against the distance that had once threatened to break them. Elena and Sarah fell back into their rhythm, their Brooklyn apartment alive with laughter, music, and the clatter of dishes. But beneath the joy, a quiet tension simmered. Sarah's grant would end in 3 months, and Elena's plan to move to Seattle hung unspoken between them. They were happy, but happiness felt fragile, like a bubble waiting to burst. Elena threw herself into preparing for the move. She contacted Seattle clients, researched apartments, and even started learning about the city's quirky coffee culture. But her abuela's health remained her anchor to New York. Maria's good days were fewer now, and Elena spent hours at her bedside, reading aloud or just holding her hand. Sarah joined them when she could, her presence a comfort to both. One afternoon, Maria pulled Elena close and whispered, "Go where your heart is, Mija. I'll be okay." Elena nodded, tears falling, but the words felt like permission. Sarah, meanwhile, was navigating her own uncertainties. The grant gave her freedom, But her future at the aquarium was unclear. Her supervisor hinted at a promotion, but it would mean staying in Seattle permanently. The thought of asking Elena to leave New York, her home, her family, felt selfish. Yet the idea of leaving her again was unbearable. Sarah started sketching more, filling notebooks with drawings of Elena, the ocean, their life together. It was her way of holding on to hope. Their first real test came in August. Elena landed a major client in Seattle, a tech startup needing a full rebrand. The project required a week-long trip for meetings, and Sarah insisted on coming along. They treated it like an adventure, exploring Seattle's rainy streets and cozy bookstores. But the trip wasn't all romance. Elena saw the demands of Sarah's job up close: late nights, urgent calls, the constant pressure to perform. It made her wonder if she could fit into this world, if she could be enough for Sarah. One evening, as they walked along the waterfront, Elena voiced her fear. "What if I move here and it's not enough? What if we're not enough?" Sarah stopped, her green eyes fierce. "You're everything to me," she said. "This job, this city, none of it matters if I lose you." They kissed under a street lamp, the rain soaking their clothes, and for a moment the doubts dissolved. Back in New York, reality hit hard. Maria's health took a sharp decline, and Elena canceled her next Seattle trip to stay by her side. Sarah offered to fly back, but Elena insisted she stay. Her project was at a critical stage. The distance crept back in, not as a physical space but an emotional one. Their calls grew shorter, their texts less frequent. Elena felt like she was failing everyone, her abuela Sarah herself. One night, alone in the hospital waiting room, Elena broke down. She called Sarah, her voice shaking. "I don't know how to do this," she said. "I can't lose her, and I can't lose you." Sarah listened, her own tears falling 3,000 miles away. "You won't lose me," she promised. "I'm here, Elena. No matter what." Maria passed away a week later, surrounded by family. Elena was devastated, but Sarah was there, flying in without hesitation. They mourned together, Sarah holding Elena through the long, quiet nights. Maria's death was a wound, but it also clarified something for Elena. Life was too short to live halfway. She loved Sarah, and she was ready to build a life with her wherever that might be. After the funeral, Elena and Sarah sat on their apartment's fire escape, the city humming below. "I'm ready," Elena said. "I want to move to Seattle. With you." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head. "I've been thinking too," she said. "I don't want you to give up New York. I can find work here. I want us to be home together." The words stunned Elena. For so long they'd been pulled between two cities, two lives. Now Sarah was choosing her, choosing them. They talked late into the night, weighing options. Sarah could apply for research positions in New York. Elena could expand her business remotely. It wasn't perfect, but it was possible. They spent the next month planning. Sarah contacted universities and research labs in New York, while Elena finalized her Seattle contracts, keeping her options open. They were a team again, their love stronger for the battles they'd fought. But life, they knew, was never simple. Just as they began to see a future, Sarah got a call from Seattle. Her supervisor offered her the promotion, a leadership role, a chance to shape the aquarium's future. It was everything she'd worked for, and it was in Seattle. The offer hung over them like a storm cloud. Sarah didn't want to go, but the opportunity was huge. Elena didn't want to hold her back, but the thought of starting over was crushing. They had 1 month to decide, and every day felt like a countdown. The final weeks of Sarah's grant were a race against time. Elena and Sarah sat at their kitchen table, laptops open, mapping out their future. Sarah's promotion offer loomed large, a golden opportunity that could define her career. But it meant Seattle, and Elena's life, her business, her memories, was rooted in New York. They were at a crossroads, and for the first time they faced it without fear. They'd survived distance, loss, and doubt. They could survive this. They spent days talking, weighing every angle. Sarah could take the promotion and they'd try long distance again. But both knew it wasn't sustainable. Elena could move to Seattle, but it would mean leaving the city that had shaped her. Or Sarah could stay in New York, seeking new opportunities, but it might mean sacrificing her dream. Neither wanted the other to give up everything, so they searched for a middle ground. One evening, over takeout and wine, Sarah found it. A research institute in Long Island was hiring, a role that aligned with her skills and passion. It wasn't as prestigious as the Seattle promotion, but it was closer to home close enough for them to build a life together. Sarah applied, her heart racing as she hit send. Elena, meanwhile, secured a contract with a New York-based nonprofit, ensuring her business could thrive without uprooting her life. The waiting was agony. Sarah's interviews went well, but the institute was slow to decide. Elena's clients demanded her focus, but her mind was on Sarah. They leaned on each other, finding solace in small moments, cooking dinner, watching old movies, walking hand in hand through Brooklyn's autumn streets. Love, they realized, wasn't just grand gestures, it was showing up, day after day, even when it hurt. 2 weeks before Sarah's grant ended, the call came. The Long Island Institute offered her the JOBA research lead with room to grow. Sarah accepted, tears streaming down her face as she told Elena. They celebrated that night, dancing in their living room to a playlist of their favorite songs. For the first time in years, the future felt like theirs. But life, as always, had one more curveball. The Seattle Aquarium called, begging Sarah to reconsider. They offered a higher salary, more resources, a chance to lead groundbreaking research. It was a dream, but Sarah didn't hesitate. "I've made my choice," she told them, her voice firm. "My home is here." When she hung up, Elena pulled her into a kiss, their laughter mingling with tears. They moved into a new apartment in Brooklyn, a small but sunny space that felt like a fresh start. Elena's business grew, her designs gracing billboards and websites across the city. Sarah thrived in her new role, her research making waves in marine conservation. They built a life together, messy, imperfect, but theirs. They fought and made up, dreamed and planned, always choosing each other. 1 year later, they stood in JFK's Terminal 4, the same place where Elena had once begged Sarah to stay. This time they were there to catch a flight together, a vacation to Hawaii, a gift to themselves after everything they'd overcome. The terminal was as chaotic as ever, but they stood still, hands clasped, watching the world rush by. Elena looked at Sarah, her heart full. "Can you stay?" she asked, a playful echo of that fateful day. Sarah grinned, her green eyes sparkling. "Always," she said and nodded, pulling Elena close. As they boarded their flight, Elena realized something. Love wasn't about avoiding pain or sacrifice. It was about choosing someone again and again through every storm. They'd chosen each other in airports, in arguments, in quiet moments, and that choice had made them whole. Their story wasn't perfect, but it was real. And in the end, that was enough. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.